Classroom Podcast Show.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Animation Fixation Podcast Show, where we talk everything animation.
Phil Tippett is a name which most stop motion and visual effects fans would recognize. From his work in the original Star Wars sequels, Starship Troopers, Willow, and his utter incompetence on Jurassic Park as the dinosaur supervisor, you had one job, Phil. Don't let the dinosaurs out. Phil Tippett has left a huge impact in stop motion and visual effects, as he would go on to win several Academy, BAFTA, Primetime Emmy, and Saturn Awards for his work.
For this episode, we are taking a look at his true magnum opus, a passion project that has spanned over 30 years. That project is, of course, Mad God. In 1990, Phil Tippett began work on Mad God, but during the rise of his studio, the project was dropped. In 2010, Tippett decided to tackle this project once again and started a Kickstarter with a budget goal of $40,000. On June 2012, the project was successfully funded, reaching a total $124,156. Production started back up on Mad God, and slowly chapters would be released for purchase on his website. However, a year before it was finished, Phil Tippett had a mental breakdown, causing him to be admitted to a psychiatric ward. The film was first screened in its entirety on the 11th of December 2021 and took in a total of over $300,000 at the box office, while also receiving a rating of 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Mad God is a stop-motion animated film that follows the journey of our protagonist, the assassin, as he delves through the depths of a strange, dark, bleak underworld filled with strange and horrific creatures. With a rather simplistic narrative and lacking any real dialogue, Mad God is a true sensory experience that you will never forget. Now, I'm really excited about this one, and I'm even more excited to hear what your thoughts are on this one, Caitlin.
I loved it. It was something unlike anything else I'd ever seen. I think having this as stop motion, having the real physical sense to something kind of quite graphic and gory was a really, really good choice, because you got to really feel like you were part of this world. You really felt immersed in this hellscape that's being painted. And I think it was a really good way of, drawing people further into the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, choosing stop motion was a real clever choice. Even though his background and specialty is in stop motion, I don't feel like this film would have given the same sort of feeling if it was done in 3D or traditional 2D animation. There's just something so, I don't know, it's something different with stop motion, because it's so difficult to fake with stop motion. Yes. Because it's all done realistically with actual puppets that are moved by hand. And yes, you often see stop motion films being incorporated with 3D animation, but at the heart of any film that uses stop motion, it just gives a completely different feeling when watching it. And with a film such as Mad God, it's such a surreal, dark experience that stop motion just takes it to a whole other level.
Absolutely. I mean, it's considering that there is no dialogue in the film, that it is very much this tonal piece, and I've been trying to think of the right way to describe it, and I'm falling somewhere between Dante's Inferno, but make it Lovecraftian gore, and a grimdark horror game take of a Magic School Bus episode. I'm kind of somewhere in between there.
Yep.
But I think being able to kind of get people into this film and be on board with, essentially, this is portraying the indifference to human suffering as horror, and this whole process of the machine of the industrial society and the horrors that brings in, having all these tiny little people that are faceless and nameless and just going about like ants all over the machine, making it function, and the lack of care for their well-being and lives that the machine is fed by their deaths and their suffering. This is something, I think, if you did this in 3D animation or 2D, as you were saying, it's not going to have the same weight to it. By having it actually being able to see all the little fibers of things as they're moving, being able to feel the splatter of things against the camera, or
Mm-hmm.
being able to kind of feel the physical squish of a character as they're
Yes.
crushed under the machine.
Yes.
It brings a whole other depth to it.
Yes. And there's so much of that. Like, it's it is a horror, but it's not one that's supposed to, at least I don't feel that it's supposed to scare. It's more so to disturb and to
Mm-hmm.
disgust. And when you actually have these scenes where these, just call it slop, it's just
Yeah.
thrown into the camera, and you get the feeling of the texture, the gooiness of it all. It kind of physically repels you in a way that, as far as 3D has come, and it's come such a long way, and it can
Yes.
look so realistic. There's just something different to having slime and sludge that's real being slapped into the camera. You just can't get that same feeling with 3D.
Yeah.
And this film is all about, at least I feel, is all about just, it's looking to create some sort of uncomfortable feeling. You're not supposed to be comfortable when watching this. And it's not purely from the visuals. The sound as well is so jarring. It's designed to make you feel uncomfortable, and
Yes, yeah.
and yet, as uncomfortable as it is watching and listening, you are still sucked into it. It's almost like a type of very dark voyeurism.
It's like a car crash. You can't look away.
Exactly.
Like, it's that, like, it's this horrific thing, but you are so engrossed in it. You just want to know what's happening.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
you're not even sure just what you're looking at. I mean, the only thing that really makes sense in this world is the main protagonist, the assassin. All he's doing is he's following this map and making his way through this world, this landscape, and we're seeing this landscape through this character's eyes, and you really get the feeling that what this character is feeling and experiencing, you're feeling that too.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like, there is, as you're going through, you do get the sense, particularly right at the end before he goes into the briefcase room.
Yes.
At the base of the tower, where there's that, what is kind of suggested is more of like a child of the workers, because it seems to be a bit shorter than the other ones. And there's kind of this moment of connection, but the second that, it's like, it's this kid or the missions or things like, bye kid.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was nice knowing you. And yeah, you really get a feel for this world, this kind of lack of, I'm not even sure that it's necessarily a lack of empathy. I think the assassin kind of, even without having dialogue, shows actually quite a lot of empathy, because we do linger on those character moments of seeing the suffering of people, and you see him pause.
Yes.
And at the end, he's trying to bring down the tower to obviously end whatever is happening here. So it's choosing this kind of greater good over the individual moments, but you still get a feeling for that empathy, even though it's mostly in the subtext, but it's there.
Yes.
It's definitely there.
Yes. And the feeling of fear as well. This isn't just a character that's just, wandering down the street. This is a character that's obviously in a very dangerous environment, and you see this character taking cover and hiding in moments that we ourselves would hide. And this character is all covered in like this safety, like diesel punk outfit that it seems like it would be very uncomfortable to wear, but you wouldn't want to wear anything else when going through this place.
Yeah.
So, it's so difficult to explain.
I think that's definitely, yeah, it's something that kind of defies a lot of explanations. You can sit here and say, oh, it means this, or it's about this, but I'm sure that as many people as watch it will have a different interpretation of it, because it is such a thought experiment, and it is a tonal piece. So, it is very much seems to be left open to interpretation in a lot of cases.
Yes. Well, it's especially when we see the assassin open up his briefcase and it's a bomb. and with a stopwatch, and he's placed it in an area that's filled with mountains of the same briefcases. So is has other assassins come to bring down this hellscape and just
See,
failed, or
I've very much read that when, like, there's all the briefcases, and then obviously with that operating theater where they're, pulling all the stuff out of the assassin, and we come back to see this dollhouse view of hundreds of other bodies in this similar position. The rebellion of and trying to bring down this tower, it's the same as, all of the other industrial processes. It's part of the machine. It's a part of the society. It's a scripted element. Whether the people that are fulfilling that function know it or not, they are another cog in the machine, and rebellion is part of it to give people that little slice of hope to keep the machine turning. And for me, I think that was kind of when I'm like, oh my God. that was kind of when the film like really hit for me, just when we pull back on that dollhouse view of those operating suites. That was interesting.
Yeah, there's just so much to take away from this film, and yet the narrative itself is very simplistic. There's no dialogue. It's purely visual and sound effects, designed in a way to make you feel uncomfortable, but done in such a clever way that you never actually want to look away. And it's just been done so well, and you can actually see why it's taken so long to do this. There was a Vice documentary. This is actually how I found out about Mad God. Was this Vice documentary called My Life in Monsters, that was interviewing Phil Tippett and talking about his experience working on Star Wars, Starship Troopers, and then goes on to talk about Mad God. And it just started out as a passion project that just got too big. You look at this film and it is a huge film for even a studio to do. There's just so much that actually went into this. So after realizing that it was too big for him, he decided to put it to bed and archiving it while working on, I think it was RoboCop 2. And some of his colleagues saw it and were like, this looks really cool. Let's bring it back. And, they did the Kickstarter. People loved what he had done already. So it wasn't really, it didn't seem to be a huge issue for him to be able to get money for it. And he's taken it to the very end. And yet he ends up having a mental breakdown.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. I think no matter what, passion projects are the ones that tend to take the most out of you, because you have this need to make them perfect. You have this vision in your head, and you are often the driving force behind it, and there might not be the full support of something else, and even then when there is, there's then the pressure of making what's in your head live up to your own expectations and other people's. So I think no matter what the content is, passion projects are grueling. But definitely, I don't think the content here would have helped. Like no. This is kind of not the world's most hopeful view on humanity.
No, it's really quite a cynical look. I mean, it's purely focusing on the negatives. When you and I were first discussing this film, and you did mention Dante's Inferno, I thought that was a very apt metaphor. I mean, it's not exactly the same as Dante's Inferno,
no.
but it certainly takes elements from it, and not just going through the 7 layers of hell, just the despair that comes from this. You're left wondering if this assassin character will make it out. I mean, he's gone on this really long journey. At the start of the film, he's in this like a diving bell that's slowly being lowered, and the sense of scale is pretty trippy. I mean, he's
very trippy.
He's going past these absolutely gigantic fossilized creatures, and it really feels like he's taking a journey through the center of the earth. and he's then reached this hellscape.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a descent of humanity. It's like, we're going through these ruins of societies. There's like the little town thing that he goes through. There's like some little like fossilized town even that he descends through. So it's like we're regressing back to humanity at its basest form, even though technologically we've like progressed. Society has regressed into this very kind of survival driven world.
Yeah, well, it's just like that saying, good times create weak people create bad times create strong people create good times. So it kind of feels now I know we're getting a little philosophical, but
I feel like this film deserves that.
It does. Well, these sorts of films that are quite ambiguous but have such a strong emotional impact, it's almost impossible not to make you reflect on your own life or how society has changed, whether it's for the better or for the worse. These films do that. They leave you questioning society, your reality, and you know what? Those are great films, the ones that leave you wondering and making you think more either internally or externally. Not leaving you thinking, oh yeah, that was all right.
It's not a bubblegum film. It's a good meaty bit of steak. You really got to chew on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I think I described this as a English teacher's wet dream. But
you're not wrong.
What do you think that the director was meaning when these characters are squished under these really heavy floating things, or when the train comes? And what about these huge beings that are being electrocuted? What is the director saying?
I really liked the touch of the baby like barking out orders on the loudspeaker, just that incoherent baby babble, because I mean, I think, it's kind of back to that industrial process stuff, that idea of, people that don't know how to do the job barking down orders to the people that actually have to do it, and that kind of disconnect in information and, knowledge. And so I think there'll be quite a few people that have suffered through some rather incompetent bosses that'll be like, this feels correct. This feels right.
Now, see, that's really interesting, because that seems very accurate. When I heard the voice, I found it like it added to the eeriness, the uncomfortable feeling. So it's the thing I love about these films is you can get so many varied opinions on people's thoughts. And, what was your thought when you heard the baby speaking over the loudspeaker, barking out orders? People are going to give all these different opinions, and none of them are wrong. It's just like saying, what feelings do you get when you look at an artwork? And this is very much an artwork.
Absolutely.
So it's very clear that we both really like this film. What didn't you like about this?
What didn't I like about this? That's a really good question. I want more of it.
It's too short.
I think that's probably my only comment, and that's gonna be infuriating, but it is. Like, I genuinely can't think of anything where I'm watching this and going, I don't like this scene, or I wish they'd done this bit differently. It was something completely different, completely unique, and it was really fascinating. I can't say that you've done anything wrong. Like, it's the music was incredible. It really carried everything, because you've got no dialogue. The music really does have to carry you through to really help you hit those emotions, and the music just did that flawlessly the whole way through. You don't consciously notice it, but it just kind of adds to that air underneath everything, where things are getting a little bit creepier. You hear the turn in the music, or I really liked in the operating suite when the assassin wakes up and is watching the clock. Just the effect of having that clock going and the tick of that clock underneath the scene, and feeling it slow down, because you feel as it slows down, because your breath starts to catch and you start to really hang out for the
Yep.
next tick, and it gives such a great air of suspense and drama, and it's I just really like this film. There had to be one,
Yeah.
Tim.
I completely understand where you're coming from. However, I do agree with you. Everything is absolutely fantastic. However, I cannot go as far to say that I felt that this was the perfect film. The part, like I felt that parts 1 and 2 absolutely flawless. Loved it. However, what got me was chapter 3 with the surgical scene. What frustrated me was the inconsistency of the style. So throughout the first two chapters, the style was very, very consistent. But in chapter 3, when we're dealing with the surgical scene, you do have a switch in styles. You're now looking at live action characters that are sometimes switched out with puppets. And to be honest, the puppets of the humans, they look really cheap, and everything else looks fantastic. Even these little worker characters that look like they're made up of fluff, they look fantastic. They probably were cheap, but they didn't feel cheap.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
When the nurse is holding the baby, and we see the puppet version of her, it made no sense to have that shot seeing her as a puppet, and it did look very cheap, and I just found that very jarring. And also having the surgeon being a live action character. But again, that's just a small gripe. This is a fantastic film. It's almost impossible to do a film perfectly, and this one is very close to getting it perfect. Those creative choices in that segment of the film, I didn't understand, and I really didn't like.
I mean, yeah, that's valid. I do remember that kind of scene where we're actually getting to see like the nurse's face quite up close, and yeah, it was a little bit different from everything else that we had seen. I thought it was kind of interesting that they were making that particularly stand out. I'm wondering if there's meant to be kind of some symbology behind that, if there's supposed to be like a specific reason that we wanted those characters to be live action or looking particularly human. So I'd be curious to actually find out some more about the intent there. That sounds like there's a story behind that.
Well, I mean, it could have been intentionally. I mean, it could have been done to try and affect the audience on a more psychological level, in that when we see the nurse, even when she lies down, because she's a live action character, where it's easier to sympathize with her than it is a puppet, especially a puppet that looks like it's not a realistic looking puppet. And so that could, I'm just speculating, but that could have been used to help make the audience feel more connected, or possibly even more disconnected, leaving the audience unsure of how to actually feel. Nothing in this world is ever certain.
I think it is really interesting because most of the time that we see the characters being in some way tortured or processed as part of this kind of diabolical machine, it is a mechanical process, or the things that are doing it are quite clearly these puppet monsters. Like, they are not human. They are something else. And this scene is the first scene where we see people that look at least even vaguely human committing kind of, these acts of torture, like, ripping out the guts of the assassin and going through this process. I'm wondering if this is something along the lines of, showing that humans are behind this descent, or whether like having her switch out with the puppet is, people start as people and they do horrible things that make them monsters. And so it's supposed to, maybe if we saw more of this down the track, there would be, more of this transitional period between, these characters becoming more horrific puppets. That would be, I think, quite interesting.
Yeah.
That's purely
Of
speculation.
course, I
But
mean,
I think that would be
uh,
interesting.
this is just one of those films where you are left to speculate. Nothing is ever really
Yeah.
certain. You expect that maybe the assassin has been destroyed at the end, or maybe he's just been created into something different.
Hmm.
And I think that when you leave films open like that, when you leave people speculating, it's a very clever way to actually bring people back, to make them want to watch it again. It's not just a
Absolutely.
film that's set to entertain you for however long the runtime is. It's designed in a way to make you to continuously think about it, to keep you wondering, which is part of the fun with a lot of these films. You know, that they leave a lasting taste in your mouth, whether it's good or bad. If it leaves something
Yeah.
there, you're more likely to come back to rewatch it again, to see what parts you missed. You know,
Yes.
and that's
Yeah.
very clever filmmaking right there.
Yeah. I know this. It has. It is really a bit of a love letter to a lot of other works as well. You can really get a sense of Fritz Lang's Metropolis in here. The one that really stood out for me actually was it feels a lot
Hmm.
like David Lynch. And I was thinking back to Mulholland Drive. It's got a little bit of that Mulholland Drive
Yep.
sort of feel to it for me, like that kind of slightly non sequitur, but also lines up perfectly. It for me was that same thought exercise. It has that real,
Mhm.
mystery feel to it. I really liked it. I found it very, very interesting, and I definitely will be
Absolutely,
rewatching this film at some
for
point
sure.
because,
And I've always
mm,
loved it when you take these mediums that were you'd probably only ever see created for kids. This is definitely something that is not created for kids. This is
yeah,
something that is very adult. I think if you showed your kids this, they will be requiring some professional help. But you know,
yes,
it's definitely worth a watch. Anyone that has any sort of fascination or interest in stop motion or any sort of animation or even filmmaking in general, this is an absolute must for anyone to
yes,
watch. It's set out as a horror. It's not scary, but it is disturbing.
no,
It's gory, but
yes,
not so much
yes.
with blood and guts. It's gory in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's
So,
accurate.
coming to the end, what are your final thoughts on this, Caitlin?
I absolutely loved this film. It's a weird one to say that you loved
Hmm.
because it is, like you said, quite disturbing content, but I really enjoyed this film. It has such a unique style. I think the story, for something so simplistically told,
Hmm.
was actually extremely effective. Um, yeah, and the music
Yes.
again, just phenomenal. Carried it beautifully all the way through. It was phenomenal. I'm gonna say
Hmm.
4.5 out of 5 because
I'm
you talked me
sorry.
down
I'm
from a
sorry.
perfect.
Um, yeah, look, I agree with all of your points. The music was absolutely
Mm,
phenomenal, and the sound effects as well. It just works so well, just setting the mood, and it worked. It just works so well. And the visuals, it's unforgettable. The visuals, it's so masterfully done,
absolutely.
and I would love to just see more of this. It's definitely a film that is rewatchable. I
Hmm.
won't say that it is a film for everybody, but
No.
it's one that is definitely going to have its long-time fans. And I think it'll become a real cult classic, especially
I
amongst
think so.
stop motion fans.
Absolutely.
Um, and I too will also give this 4.5 out of 5. It was that good.
Yeah.
I wanted to give it 5, but I
You talked
couldn't.
both
I
of us out of it,
couldn't.
Tim.
I did. So were you actually going to do 5 stars?
I was on the fence. I was on the fence because as amazing as I think it is, I'm always hesitant to say things are perfect because I think there's always going to be something you're like, there's always room for
Mhm.
improvement. It's that kind of that's how my grading scale works. There's always room for improvement.
Exactly, but I do feel that there are films out there that are definite 5 stars, but This one is, it was so close, but not quite there. But look, that being said, thank you everyone so much for listening to this podcast, and stick around for the next one. Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.